the most solemn American holiday, a day to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice while defending their nation.
But it is also...
It's the 3-day weekend that officially kicks off the summer season. A time for hanging at the beach, barbecuing, even catching a few laps of the Indy 500.
This week, we celebrate Memorial Day, as it was made an official holiday to be the last Monday in May. But within this celebration, the memory of what is taking place and what has taken place previously has somehow come to be forgotten.
The Civil War, America's bloodiest chapter. Over 600,000 soldiers killed in action.
For example, within the clip that was just played, the History Channel goes over the history of Memorial Day and how it is historically tied to the Civil War.
Almost every community in every state suffered the loss of young men. As the war came to an end, mourners in both northern and southern states began placing flags and flowers on the graves of fallen soldiers.
And in this particular video, it states that the town of Waterloo, New York, is officially credited with starting the holiday in the year of 1866, even though there's information that credits the holiday to being started a year earlier.
2,000 or 3,000 black children carrying armloads of roses and flowers and singing John Brown's body, followed by black women, black men, and then Union troops. And they marched around the course, and then they gathered in this cemetery.
Today, Memorial Day is a holiday that's meant to honor those who made the ultimate sacrifice as a member of our armed forces, for both those who are alive and for those who are no longer here. It is a day of honor, but in the past, it was a day meant only to honor the dead. So why is it systematically tied to the start of summer? And how does a day for honoring the dead correlate with barbecues, kids jumping into the pool, and the Indianapolis 500? 500, 500, 500, 500.
Produced by Dane Calloway and Taneisha Calloway. Watch this brand new documentary, Mother Rosa, right now at DaneMakeYouThink.com.
So let's start off by revisiting a video I did a few months ago called The Dark Truth About the Term Indian. Within this video, I asked a question. How can you regulate the trade of an independent contractor and then state that they are not a part of the company, Now think about this from a personal standpoint. If you, as an employee, helped to build an organization in which you were made promises that weren't fulfilled, you were overworked and underpaid, and there were even stipulations that halted you from going elsewhere, what would you do? This is what happened in the past, except there wasn't a change to this type of behavior until after the Civil War. As a matter of fact, this is what caused the Civil War to start, because someone else being able to regulate your trade in all aspects systematically turns you into a slave. And the problem that comes from this is one of trust, because how would you know if those same people that harmed you in the past, how would you know that they will never do it again? And why would you want to do business with someone like that in the first place? Well, in my video, following that question, I wrote a statement on the screen that said, "They told the children of those people that they were from a totally different continent." So instead of paying what they owed, and to make sure that the children wouldn't go after it, they were tricked into believing that they were someone else and that they weren't owed anything. Now, there's a two-part to this because within the same video, I stated how the term Indian is hiding a much deeper and darker meaning than what was previously known, as it was placed upon those who were in the process of being conquered. Because of this, you can find the term Indian from a historical aspect not only being placed upon the indigenous Americans of Turtle Island, but it was done to some of the Chinese, to the people from Hindustan. This is also why it is being used in reference to Memorial Day, because these foreigners, they know who you are. And these particular characters were only created as a defense, All of this brings us back to the reason why they used the word Indian with particular groups of people originally in the first place. And this plan was presented by foreigners long before you were even thought of. The reason for this is tied to the root of the word, which is Indi. The word Indi is short for independent, or for the Indianapolis 500, which is meant to be a single-seated racer, or an independent contractor. For the purpose of division, of course. Notice how the History Channel mentions the Indianapolis 500 in relation to Memorial Day. Listen closely.
It's the 3-day weekend that officially kicks off the summer season. A time for hanging at the beach, barbecuing, even catching a few laps of the Indy 500.
Don't you think that's strange? But they're just putting it in people's faces, thinking that no one is aware of what is really going on. Do note that the only way you can catch the lap of a person is if their knee is bent in submission, whether they are sitting with both knees bent or holding a stance of bowing. A Negro, which is what American Indians were ultimately misclassified to before deciding to take on the term of Black or African American. So let's talk about the kids jumping in the pool and why summer is systematically being tied to Memorial Day. But first, let's take a look at this.
I had a very lucky discovery in my research for my book on Civil War memory. I found it in a collection at the Houghton Library at Harvard, the papers of an old Union veterans organization. There was a file labeled First Decoration Day. And I opened it, and here was a handwritten narrative on a piece of cardboard.
Decoration Day is the original name of Memorial Day before it was officially changed by an act of Congress in 1967. A decoration is an ornament or embellishment, anything added which renders more agreeable to the eye. In theaters, this definition deals with the scenes which are changed as occasion requires.
I went over and got out the New York Herald Tribune for that date in late spring of 1865 in Charleston, South Carolina. And whoever wrote that down put the wrong date. I kept looking and kept looking and kept looking and kept looking, and finally, there it was. Verbatim, that story. It was describing a parade held in Charleston, South Carolina on May 1st, 1865. The Civil War had ended, just ended. Charleston had been evacuated by the Confederates back in February.
Now, what is being stated here is extremely significant because the images show a war-torn environment and children left behind. What is also being stated is that the Confederate soldiers left, and so it is immediately being portrayed to the public as if it is some form of abandonment And it's done this way because the next few statements will seem quite odd without this portrayal.
The people left in Charleston, by and large, were all African Americans and Union troops, some white, some black. And the story on this narrative was people gathered on the old Planters horse track, the racetrack in Charleston. It was called the Washington Race Course, and they held this extraordinary parade. In the last 6 to 8 months of the war, the Confederates had converted the infield of that racetrack into an open-air prison, and about 260 Union soldiers had died of exposure and disease, and they'd all been thrown in a mass grave out behind the grandstand of the race course. About 10,000 people marched around the old Planters race course. And the oval is still there in a park. But it said it was led by some 2,000 or 3,000 black children carrying armloads of roses and flowers, followed by black women, black men, and then Union troops. And they marched around the course, and then they gathered in this cemetery that had been created by local black workmen. And they heard the preaching from 5 black ministers, according to this article.
And somehow, the Reverend is behind it again. From the Civil War of the 1800s to the Civil War of the 1900s. So is history going to repeat itself?
Every instinct in me says this is death.
Flooded.
Flooded means to use a just as they have done before. And I say this because, just like in the past, they are planning to use some sort of religious figure to bring about economic death.
And a small black children's choir sang the national anthem, America the Beautiful, and 3 or 4 spirituals.
Now that story does sound quite unbelievable without further explanation, but the fact is, they are leaving out quite a bit of the story, because South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union, which means they no longer wanted to work with the Union or be in any type of relationship with them. They no longer wanted to be in communion as a part of the Union's church. And the thing about this is that these are foreigners calling themselves a Union. Once the indigenous people realized that they were being scammed and that it was a bad business deal, they decided to leave. And that meant the American Indians would then have to move forward with guarding themselves, henceforth the Confederate Army. Now the lie that is being told is that the Confederate Army were moving to attack other locations, and they weren't. They were only in place to give the same protection that these so-called foreign allies claimed to be providing, knowing that they couldn't do trade on their own without a certain amount of employees to back them, so they decided to attack. It's giving crazy deranged X who can't get over the fact that you may not want them nor need them anymore. And so the Union goes on a rampage to destroy what these indigenous civilian populations have built, in hopes that they can convince them into a new Union, because their only gift from the start was a fake form of protection. So this is what they are decorating. And what we are paying memorial to is the news story that was made up to account for unnecessary attacks on civilians so that business could run as usual. And so let's go back to the kids jumping in the pool and why summer is systematically being tied to Memorial Day. The reason for that answers the question that I asked at the start, and that is, how do you control the trade for a group of people, do them wrong, and then get them to continue to work for you? You don't. you go after their children, as the children jumping into the pool signifies the children who will be moving into the job pool or the workforce. The barbecue resembles employers being able to feed off of their energy, and the word summer is defined as one who casts up an account. So, it is the start of a business accumulation as far as the quantity of money or currency that these companies are expecting to receive, since taxes were just paid in the spring. And who are they looking to hire? Well, those who have been placed in the category of D, those who can be overworked and underpaid, portrayed by the lapse of the Indy 500, single-seated independent contractors, not in union with each other. American Indians, Negroes, Blacks, African Americans. As far as the name goes, choose one, because none of this matters if they know that at some point in time, you're just going to hand them your children, and that means they'll never have to pay you what they owe. 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 I'm just here to make you think.